Welcome to the EchoCast, episode 150, a landmark. I am Morgan, aka Bon Diesel, and this is a podcast about gaming, gaming news, gaming platforms, and technology from the perspective of a lifelong nerd and now father. Please take a moment to subscribe to and rate the podcast on whatever platform you listen to it on. Comments on YouTube, retweets on Twitter, and iTunes reviews are the most helpful. Also, be sure to let me know if you have any questions or topics for the next show by replying on Twitter and the YouTube comments or by becoming a patron. Thank you to this month's Patreon supporters: Hassan, Christian, Darren, Tim, PK, Man-Made Golf, Lunchbox, and Dale. If you would like to support this podcast, please check out patreon.com/BonDiesel. This week, we will be taking a look back at the EchoCast podcast, talk about the 12 minutes release, some Halo news, Unreal Engine 5 announcements, BF 2042 news, some content updates, and more. So let's jump right on into it, and we will start off with a little bit of a look back. So this is the 150th episode. If I have to be totally frank, I intended on having some guests and having this be a bigger production. Unfortunately, life got in the way, and this just happens to be the busiest time of the year for me and my family. So that didn't happen, and that's okay. There's always episode 200 to worry about. But I did a little bit of reminiscing, and I looked back to see the first episode I posted of this show was on March 22nd of 2018, which seems forever ago and not that far ago at the exact same time. So it's been, almost 3.5 years of, I think I want to say it was at least the first 100 episodes without missing a week. It was a weekly podcast. That was very convenient because of the timing. I started streaming, so you have to think that was almost exactly, or I started podcasting, that was almost exactly a year before Division 2 released. So, I had, it was a Division focused podcast, as I'm sure most of the people who are listening, that's, why they were here and still are to a point. And, you had all of the things you could talk about for Division 1. I was going back and talking about from release, possible DLC things that happened, things that didn't happen. I want to say that was not long after or around when 1.8 was released. So there was a lot to talk about with that. And then obviously, shortly after was the announcement of Division 2. It was only a week or two after I think I started the podcast that I was selected to go to E3 as a star player in 2018. So I had the star player E3 experience to talk about all of that. And so, that it was so much fun there at the beginning. I actually did have guests back then. Not very many, but I had a few here and there. I really enjoy the podcast. It's a good time for me to talk about games and things I see and things like that. I really do enjoy it even today. But there was something special and unique. I'd been married already. We had our house, but we didn't have a child yet, and I basically could just do whatever I felt like. And at that time, I was able to really focus on it and really try to grow it, and it grew really well. And in the lead up to Division 2, that was probably my favorite time. There would be information drops. The beta came out. We were able to talk about that. There was all kinds of stuff to really go after. And then after Division 2 came out, was a lot of fun as well. It was talking about the game, talking about the issues, talking about the things that were coming up, lots of speculation and things like that, which I would cringe to go back and listen to now, because unfortunately, with the way games go, a lot of times speculation ends up being a little more exciting than what you actually end up getting. I think we all understand that. So then now, as time has gone on, Division came out in 2019. Division 2 did. In the 2 years since then, 2.5 years now, obviously, the first year and a half, there was quite a bit to talk about almost every week. And I recorded that. I think that is when I finally did start to drop off. I actually believe I was still doing weekly episodes. I remember now, through my daughter being born in 19. So I remember I didn't miss an episode, and I still recorded. So it must have been in 2020 when I finally missed an episode, missed a week, because I remember I would record on a Samsung earbuds mic through the Anchor app on my phone while my daughter was napping on the floor or on the couch or wherever she was napping when she was like an infant. And so, those were fun times. And, especially this last year or year and a half, really ever since Warlords of New York came out for Division 2, the podcast has changed quite a bit. I remember I played that Warlords of New York DLC that came out in early 2020. And I remember being like, I played it for 10 hours. I beat that whole DLC in one day on one stream. And I then didn't play Division again for like 6 weeks. and the season started dropping and the manhunt started coming, and I noticed myself not having that much to talk about. It was fun speculating about what some of the story things they were dropping in those manhunts. But what happened is the same thing that happened with year one of Division. I kept like hoping like, okay, well, maybe the next season or the next manhunt will be that like really cool experience. And then the final manhunt came out with Fei Lao, who was a big character from Division 1, if you're not familiar with the game. And it ends in what can only be described as, a very lackluster fashion. So that is when I have started. I haven't actually played the Division for more than maybe 20 minutes since the Fei Lao mission dropped. I think that was back in March. I've been taking a break, and that's when I started to expand the podcast. And I obviously, if you listen consistently, I still talk about a lot of Ubisoft stuff. I still find a way to mention Division one way or the other, which I do multiple times in the rest of this podcast. I do wish I could just get back to that, but we're where we are now, and that's fine. As Heartland comes out, hopefully as Division 2 content comes out, as maybe X Defiant comes out, the book, the movie, so on and so forth. I probably will return this podcast back to some of its roots, and will honestly be more motivated to probably stream and things like that. But all of those things are on unknown timelines right now. So it's hard to predict what's going on. We don't have any release dates. We don't have any concrete information about basically anything, which we'll talk about in a moment. But yeah, so thank you all who are listening and who have listened in the past for 150 episodes. I would love for there to be 150 more episodes. And I really hope to keep this train going down the tracks. So, okay, so let's jump into some gaming news I've missed over the last couple of weeks. So the big one was actually the most recent update, probably, is Halo Infinite made a fairly big announcement. They announced that there will be no co-op story for the first 3 months, and that there will be no Forge until 6 months. So the co-op story, it's really interesting seeing different perspectives on this. I have played since Halo 1. I think I actually played Halo 1 on my PC back in the day. And never played Halo co-op because that's not the intended experience, in my opinion. Master Chief, he doesn't fight in a team. That's the whole thing, is that he's a solo fighter, right? He's so powerful that he can do it on his own. And so, I feel for the people who are upset about the 3 months thing. but I've seen like a few people be like, this is a core of the Halo experience to play the single player co-op, and I think that's false. I'm not saying that you shouldn't want to. That's obviously you should. And if you're upset that you can't for, when the game releases, that's a totally justifiable position. But I really don't think it's as popular as some people think. It's interesting. It's interesting to see different perspectives. I very well could be wrong. But literally, I mean, the way the story is that actually doesn't make sense to play co-op from a lore and story perspective. Obviously, from a fun and social perspective, I'm sure it's a blast to play co-op, but it literally like doesn't make sense if you think about it. So I can't understand the people being as upset with that as a few seem to be, because I really think it's there's a reason they were willing to delay it, and it's probably because their stats over the years have shown that it can't be a very large percent of the population that cares about that. The Forge thing is kind of weird too. Forge is one of those things that if you talk to a Halo fan, I think that there's a lot of people who are like, yeah, Forge is like the coolest thing ever. And there's people who would even be like, oh, that sucks that it's not going to be out. But then there's also this perspective of like, I was listening to a podcast where it's all Xbox fans, and they're like, well, what's your favorite Forge map? And they were all like, I don't really have one. So Forge is almost like one of those things that like everyone's like super proud that it exists, but that maybe it doesn't really have that many people playing it. I don't know. It's kind of hard to tell. But the big thing is that we still do know that the free to play multiplayer and the single player story will be releasing at launch. I can understand, especially being a Division fan, people being skeptical or kind of being put off by, basically they've answered that, well, yeah, that stuff won't be available, but it's an ongoing experience. We'll release it when it's ready. That makes anyone who's a Division, Destiny, Anthem, Warframe, whatever fan, your eyes like roll into the back of your head and spin around 100 times because you've heard this before, right? To varying levels of success and honesty, but I don't think it's that big of a deal, and I think that the only people making a big deal out of the co-op thing and the Forge thing are the relatively small percent of people that actually impacts, and a larger number of people who are just looking for any reason to down 343 or Xbox or Halo, and so I don't know. I don't think it's that big of a deal, and I think that it's going to be all right. I've even seen some commentary about people being like, well, Halo Infinite can't be like Halo 5. If it's like Halo 5, if it's a failure and it gets dogged on by people, it's the end of Halo. No, it's not. No, it's not. It'll still sell 10 million copies, at least, or be played by 10 million people, depending on how they are going to measure that. And it's going to be fine. There will be a Halo. Well, Halo Infinite is supposed to be a 5 to 10 year project. I'm under the impression where they're going to add and add and add story and multiplayer stuff. So Halo's going to be fine, even if it's not that great. And that's the simple fact. That's where they're at. And Halo still, I think, is the front runner, the main franchise for this platform, for the Xbox platform. Even if it's not really the best franchise on the platform anymore. And what is going to be interesting to me is that as time goes on and as we accept all these studios that Xbox purchased, and we start to think of them as Xbox studios, as Xbox devs, is a game from Bethesda going to become what people think of first when they think of Xbox? Is it going to be a game like Hellblade? Is it going to be a game from one of these other studios that they're working on, Perfect Dark and things like that? It's interesting. It's interesting times. I'm really curious to see what the landscape is in 5 years. Okay, the second story here is about 12 minutes. So this is a game that has been in development for 5 or 6 years now. It's getting lots of mixed reviews. If you haven't seen anything about it, it's a game where it takes place in 12-minute increments. You basically your character walks into their apartment, speaks to their girlfriend or their wife. They eat dinner, they hang out, and then a few minutes into your playthrough, a cop knocks on the door, and things go haywire. And what happens is when you die, or if the 12 minutes runs out, it starts a new 12 minutes, and it does this, and you have to slowly piece together puzzles and story to progress the game and go on. So I haven't played it, but I have basically learned everything about it that you can learn. It's I would definitely throw out a trigger warning for people. If you have issues with suicide or sexual violence and things like that, you know, there's definitely stuff to be careful of, especially as the game winds up and as you get deeper into the game and the story. I want to play it. The problem is that I've delved so deeply into learning about it, is I really need to wait a few months to play it so I can kind of forget some of the stuff I've learned to actually enjoy it. Last night I was watching a stream, and it was kind of funny, and one of their hosts, someone posed them the question, would you rather play Resident Evil 8 or 12 minutes? And like, I wanted to hit myself in the head with a hammer. Like, that's such an insanely stupid question. Like, one, I actually think Resident Evil 8 looks terrible. I hate I hate the way it looks. I don't like the setting. I hate the characters look terrible. The voice acting and stuff is okay, but I feel like I'm on an island, and looking like that game does not look appealing at all. Controls look bad. It just looks rough. And 12 minutes doesn't look that great either, but you're talking about a game who probably literally has maybe a couple $1 million budget in 12 minutes, compared to a game that probably has one of the biggest budgets that game's ever had, more than likely, in Resident Evil 8. So you're talking about an indie game of the most severe variety, that just basically got a boost by Xbox, which is why they were able to get Daisy Ridley and Willem Dafoe, to voice in it. But you're talking about like two games of two very different levels of polish and expectation. And so what it seems like to me, the overall thought is that 12 minutes is worth playing, is worth checking out, but it's probably not going to be for anybody. And it really does seem like a love it or hate it thing, like to the nth degree, where it literally seems like people either genuinely love that game. I think like, yeah, it was a great experience. I'm glad I played it. It blew my mind. It made me disgusted, or people were like, yeah, I played like 5 minutes of it. I couldn't even get through one, and I just didn't like it. So I am curious to what anyone who listens to this thinks. So if you play it, or if you jump into it, or you even just binge spoiler stuff like I did, let me know. I'm curious to what you think of it, and tag me on Twitter or comment in the YouTube comments. We had a few. We learned that Stalker 2, which is a game that's not developed by a Xbox studio, but is going to be exclusive to Xbox and PC, is going to be Unreal Engine 5. The Unreal Engine or Epic or whoever made a post about, I think it was Hellblade or another game that we know is Unreal Engine 5. And then kind of unexpectedly, the Stalker Twitter account quote tweeted it and said like, hey, you can count us in too. And that's notable because the Stalker 2 game is expected to come out, I think it's in the spring. And it very well may be the first Unreal Engine 5 game that isn't Fortnite. The update for Fortnite to Unreal Engine 5, I think, is expected fairly soon, this year, I believe. And it's going to hopefully take advantage of all those new fancy tools they have that they've been showing off quite a bit. It's interesting, there's always so much hype about these big engine releases. The problem is that you very often see that, obviously in this case, there's a bunch of big headline games that are going to take advantage of it first thing. I believe we know that the next Gears installment will also have Unreal Engine 5, where the Gears of War franchise has always been kind of like on the leading edge of the Unreal tech, and showcasing what that engine can do. So it'll definitely be interesting to see where they're going with that. And the Stalker game looks really interesting. My only real issue is that the one bit of quote unquote gameplay that we've seen like wasn't gameplay. Like that was very clearly a scripted like cinematic. It was probably using in-game assets and all that, I have no doubt. But some of the way that the character moved and stuff just was not a thing that I think you can really do in a game like with a mouse and keyboard. And it just looked very obviously to be a cinematic. So the game looks interesting from looking at the history of the Stalker franchise. That this game has a ton of potential to be almost like an Escape from Tarkov, single player type experience that has a lot of like factions and tons of RPG elements and lots of just interesting ways to play it and interact with that world. So I'm interested. I'm curious. I always mixed up Stalker with Metro, and I believe the biggest difference is I think Stalker has a lot more like supernatural kind of vibes, where I believe that Metro, from what I've played of it, is much more grounded and doesn't have as many kind of goofy things going on, but it's still pretty cool. Speaking of Escape from Tarkov, I made a post about talking about how I had a couple experiences playing Tarkov where they have a new Scav Karma system. And what that means is, I think I've explained this before, in Escape from Tarkov, every time you go into, it's a session-based looter game where you're trying to complete tasks and quests that either involve killing things, collecting things, or doing things. And there's 5 or 6 maps, and you can go into them for, up to like 45 minutes at a time. And you go into these maps with 10 to 14 other players, depending on how big the map is. And so you're friend or foe with them. It's mostly shoot on sight. The Scav Karma system has changed that a bit. But there's also AI, and there's AI of different levels. There's basic AI, which are called scavs. There's raiders, who are these more advanced, heavily armored AI, and then there's bosses, and they're very heavily armored, and they normally have friends who are very heavily armored. And the way the Scav Karma thing is when you go in and you play Tarkov, there's 2 ways you can play at any given time. You can play as a PMC. This is your main character. This is a character you're leveling up their stats. This is your character that can progress in quest and task. You get to pick what weapons and armor and whatever this character takes in, and you go in and you're hostile to all of the AI, and not technically hostile to other people, but for the most part, it's a shoot on sight situation. The other way that you can interact with the Tarkov world is to play as a scav. So when you're selecting which one you want to do, you'll see your player on the right and then a scav on the left. And the scav, it's a one-time use character. Whether you die or you get out of the map successfully, you'll never play that exact scav again. And they get random weapon loadouts and stuff, and gear and things like that. So they implemented the Scav Karma system, and the way it works is you spawn in as a scav, and the other scavs, the other AI, are not hostile to you if you have high Scav Karma, and you get karma by extracting, by helping, by there's a bunch of things that you can do specifically by killing PMCs, the regular players. There's all this stuff you can do to gain Scav Karma, and as it goes up by not killing other scavs, you get better gear on your random loadouts, and you can even get to the point where you can get AI to help you. You can like have them follow you, and it's actually really neat. You can also lose Scav Karma by killing other scavs, by doing bad things, to the point where like a normal scav, you can play it every 15 minutes. So if you go in, you play as a scav, you get out with a bunch of gear, and there's a 15-minute delay. That's when a lot of people go and play on their PMC, and then they go back and forth. If you have low Scav Karma, yeah, you can actually get to the point where you have to wait like an hour or 2 hours between each scav. And that's, kind of that system. The reason I explain all of that is that, especially since the Scav Karma system got put in, there's so many instances where you're in this and you'll see another player and you can wiggle. There's different ways to try to show people that you're friendly. You can wiggle by peeking back and forth, or you can calm, but it's all in Russian, so you can't. So at least English speakers like myself, it's useless to try to actually use the voice comms because it's all just random Russian gibberish to me. But that's how people still use that to be like, hey, like I'm friendly. And just seeing the way that some of these things have played out, you'll see like a scav and another scav meet up and they'll wiggle and they'll kind of be careful with each other, and then they'll run to the middle and one will drop some item they picked up that's really valuable, but they don't really need it. And then the idea is that the other person will do the same and you may end up helping each other out. I've seen that happen. I've seen it happen where like 5 or 10 scavs will all find each other and be friendly and then go around the map and start trying to hunt PMCs that are still on the map. And where, one-on-one, most PMCs are geared up enough that a scav with some random loadout can't kill them. You have to be incredibly lucky. But 5 or 6 scavs, even if they all crappy gear, can overwhelm a PMC really easily, even if they're completely decked out with like the best gear. And so you see that play out, and you see it, and you see scavs betray each other. You'll see it's happened to me, where a scav, played friendly with me, dropped me some gear. I gave him back some gear, and it looked like we were going to run around and do stuff together. And then the moment I wasn't looking, they blew my head away and stole my stuff. And what's so funny to me is that Tarkov has always felt a little bit like I wish Division was. You can actually look at my YouTube and go back, gosh, it's a couple of years now. I did a whole video about how I felt like the DZ could take a lot of stuff from Tarkov, or from the concept of Tarkov, and make it a much more exhilarating, thrilling experience. Where I think, in Division 1 and 2, the DZ just, the problem is I think that the devs intended for it to be a cooperative experience with a chance of PvP, and that's not how the players have ever played it. And you can force that to happen, the devs' idea, but with incentives and with punishments for not playing the game the way that they want, but they've also never done that. So you have this game mode, or this game area that's designed for people to cooperate, and then potentially fight, in certain circumstances. And instead you've had 2 games where it's just pure, they've tried to make it a PvP arena. The problem is that PvP for most people inherently needs to be balanced in some capacity to be enjoyable, and but still allow a skill gap, so that if you're better at a particular thing than someone else and you use that to your advantage, you can win and they can do the same. The problem in Division is that it's not like that. None of the PvP is like that, even the organized PvP mode like Conflict. And so there's been so many moments while playing Tarkov, especially with the Scav Karma system, where you can kind of like organically create relationships in the game. That's happened to me in the DZ. I know Division 2 especially, there are multiple times I'd be fighting a checkpoint and I'd see another agent do it, and we would kind of like, kind of run around each other a little bit, see if we're going to play friendly, see if the other one was going to go rogue. And then they like invite you to their party and then you're good to go. But you can't do that in Tarkov. So you can team up with someone, but you can't like invite them to your party and get rid of friendly fire. It doesn't happen. You can kill your friends all the time. So there's just, I don't know. I really don't know where I'm going exactly with all this, but my main point, I guess, is that there's been so many instances in Tarkov where I've seen things happen where I can think about how, like, man, that'd be so cool if that happened in Division's PvP, especially in Division's DZ areas, where instead of being these sweaty PvP only zones with, the same couple meta, loadouts and guns, where people are dancing around and doing the same things that they've always done. It'd be cool if there were these like organic moments, and if there was actually tension. I've said forever that I think in the DZ you should lose your gear when you die. Then people would actually, play a little bit safer, and or at least differently than they currently do or have in the past. Yeah. So I don't know, man. I have a hard time honestly recommending Tarkov to anyone who hasn't played it yet. If you ever do play it, buy the cheapest version first, and then if you like it, maybe buy the more expensive one. Um, but there's just things in that game that would just make um, a similar experience that's a little more casual in the Division world would be so cool. But we'll have to see if that ever happens. The next thing is actually about the Division. So I did a week or two ago finish the Hearts on Fire audiobook. My overall thoughts on it, I won't spoil anything. I think it is worth listening to. If you're a Division fan and you care about the story and lore and stuff of the Division, you should check it out. It is cool. It's a good story. It just very much reminds me of it was the Delta Squad in Division 1, where you kind of follow their story through the echoes, and then you find their bodies in that gas station or the car shop, and then you find out later that one of them is the one who frees April Keller, and but he dies saving her because he's getting revenge on I think it was the Rikers who killed his squad mates. And she takes his gear, and that's the Division gear that she carries in Division 1 and in the book leading up to Division 2, Broken Dawn. If anything, like, this audiobook almost felt very much like they almost ripped off the Delta story of those, and there's some elements towards the end that are basically the same, but there are twists, and there are very unique aspects of the Hearts on Fire thing. So the voice acting is obviously the most important part of an audiobook, and it was pretty good. I don't remember their names off the top of my head right now, but one of the main characters is someone who voiced someone in The Last of Us 2, and she was good. The other main person, and the main person, is a lady that was in The Mandalorian, and she's been in a bunch of other stuff. I think it's Katie Sackhoff, I believe. And she was excellent. She was extremely good. I really liked her voice acting a lot. There were some cheesy moments. I've seen other people talk about how it's kind of hard to follow what's going on, especially during the gunfights, which I can definitely agree with. I think that they do a pretty good job with that, but there's definitely moments where you're like, I have no idea what's going on. And you kind of have to wait for everything to stop. And then you like hear who talks to see who's still alive. It's weird. Like, there's parts of it where you can tell that whoever wrote this didn't understand the Division. There's multiple references and things that they say where you're like, that doesn't make any sense. One cool thing that I don't think is spoilery is, one of my favorite hype moments was a decent chunk into it. You hear Isaac for the first time, and that was pretty dope. That first time you hear that voice come up, that was pretty awesome. And then the way that they introduced the skills, and the way that they introduced them, that because like in real life, the skills in the Division would just be so overpowered and so insanely unfair, you know. But the way they introduce them in this book is very grounded, or in the audiobook is very grounded, and is actually really, really cool. They introduce, I think, the pulse and the turret, and it's pretty dope. It's really, really neat. So I think it's almost worth listening to just for those couple of reasons. But yeah, I mean, the thing was, I even posted this on Twitter after I finished it, and I mean, this just reminds me so much of how badly the Division, like how well it would perform if you made The Last of Us 2 style game in the Division's world universe. You know, if you made a Mass Effect style game in the Division universe, like think about if Division 1, 2, and a potential Division 3 one day played out like Mass Effect 1, 2, and 3 instead, where in the 1, you get introduced as a new agent, you go through, you make choices, you decide to kill certain bosses or not, you decide to serve certain NPCs or you don't, you build squad mates, you meet with them back at the base of operations, you decide who goes out with you, you make moral choices, but you still have a bunch of gameplay and shooting, and you get to use your skills and upgrade your skills and do all of that stuff, and then it leads up to the end of the game, and then Division 2 starts, and all those choices you made carry forward into what's happening in Division 2. And you do the same thing, you fight the new big bad, you do all the stuff, you make all the choices, and then it finishes with some big epic moment, and then Division 3 comes out, and all of the choices you made for the first 2 games carry over to the third. Your character is worn and scarred, and you know you're wrapping up the trilogy in some capacity. I know a lot of Division fans are really stuck on this idea of the looter shooter and stuff like that. And it's obviously been successful. Both games have sold over 10 million copies, even though some of the more diehard fans, I think, are a little more negative about the franchise than they should be. And I still see who talk about the Division 2 being a failure. It's like, it wasn't a failure. It just wasn't meant to be played forever. And if you talk to devs, which I have, you'll talk to people who the Division isn't trying to really compete with Destiny. And obviously in some ways it is. They share a genre and things like that. But Destiny wants you to play Destiny forever. I'm not aware of any indication that the Division was built to be played forever. And that's okay. But that's fine. The people who say Division's a failure and stuff, they have an agenda, and they would say it no matter how good or bad the game was. But I really think that this audiobook was just another example of how like this franchise and this world would just fit so well into a different genre of game. And it's a real bummer that so many fans are unwilling to even consider that could happen, and that it seems like Ubisoft is so weird with the Division's franchise that I don't think a Division 3 is even guaranteed, let alone some type of spin-off single-player game. But we'll have to wait and see. The last bit on this topic is that they did confirm, I believe in February or March, there's a book coming out, a paper book called Recruited. So what's interesting about that is that this audiobook, Hearts on Fire, dealt a lot with recruitment and training of the Division agents. So it's interesting that they're going to put out a book that's going to go even more into it. What I'm interested in is if it's going to be a book almost entirely about their recruitment and training. And maybe it won't really even cover that much of the crisis or when they actually get activated. So I would definitely be curious to how that's going to work. Unfortunately, it's not Alex Irvine who's writing this book, who did Broken Dawn and the New York Survival Guide for Division 2 and 1. It's a guy who has written a bunch of Warhammer books. He seems like he's a very highly regarded author of video game properties. And he, when I was looking him up, I initially was afraid, like, oh God, what's this guy been up to? Why is he like disappeared from the internet and stuff? And it's actually because he defended some kind of abused groups. I guess the Warhammer community has some issues, and he basically pushed back on some offensive things that some of the community believes and thought and things like that. And he basically got pushed out of the community. So it's cool. It seems like he's a very well accomplished and very good writer. So if he wants to take the helm of the Division when it comes to that, that's great. I am bummed that Irvine isn't involved. I really feel like the New York Collapse book is one of the most unique and coolest storytelling bits I've ever seen from a video game franchise and from a book on its own independently. And then I really think Broken Dawn, while I know some people don't like it as much because it's just a novel rather than being like a really unique way of telling a story, the Broken Dawn story would be a 15-20 million sell book or a game. If they made the Broken Dawn game into a game, it would be more successful in Division 1 or 2, in my opinion. It's such a cool story. It's a real shame that kind of lore and those kind of stories are probably always going to be held back to books and other media, and that we won't ever get to see Division agents as they would like really seem in real life. Instead, we have this looter shooter portrayal of them, which is fine. It's cool, but it's not the same, man. It's I will always hurt for a realistic Division game. I will always deep down hurt for a game that, you know, is like feels real and isn't, you know, you putting armor plates into your chest so you can tank 1,000 bullets. So but that's just me. Talking a bit about Division, or not Division, Battlefield 2042. So we have some new trailers, gameplay stuff. So it looks like storytelling wise, we know that 2042 doesn't have a story campaign, but they've started releasing some cinematic storytelling things. And honestly, if that's how they end up doing this, I am here for it, because this trailer was so cool. It brings back some characters from Battlefield 4. And it seems like they're trying to actually continue the story past Battlefield 4. And it just sets things up really well. So it sounds like I did play in a beta test of 2042, but the NDA is extremely strict, so I will not be talking about my experiences. What I can say is that there's been a bunch of leaked footage, and it looks like they're doing a really good job of trying to pull back in that Battlefield 3 feeling. And so we'll have to, you know, wait for that. What is cool is that I think we're expecting to hear a bunch about 2042 at Gamescom this week. So hopefully we'll get some announcements and some showing of that. And there's even there's a rumor that there's a mode in Battlefield 2042 that there's going to be the multiplayer, this portal thing where it combines stuff from all the different games, and then a third game mode that's coming called, I think, Hazard Zone. And it seems like it's basically supposed to be Escape from Tarkov, but in Battlefield. And if that's real, if that's for real, a more casual, it's almost like what I said about what I wish Division 2's DZ was. If this Battlefield thing is going to be a casual-ish Escape from Tarkov experience on what is a much superior engine. Escape from Tarkov uses Unity, and it uses Unity 2018, where Frostbite. While Frostbite's had issues with some games, it's hard to deny that it's not incredible when teamed up with Battlefield. If this really is going to be like a Tarkov light kind of experience in Battlefield, I am here for it. I am here for it all day, every day. That would be super exciting. The second to last story, or the last story really, or thing I want to talk about, is the Division Heartland. So I made a post on Twitter right before I recorded this, just like with question marks, and then the Heartland posted, because I've seen some of the other people post about it. I mean, it's been months, right? So without breaking any agreements or anything like that I've made, I can't go into any kind of detail, but I think I can strategically say that I should know a lot more than other people about what's going on, and I have no idea. So I literally feel like I don't know anything more than anyone else. So now, obviously, if I did know more, I wouldn't even mention it. So when I do find out more than you, I just won't be talking about it, and that's okay. I still do, from a purely no inside information, because I have none at this point. I really do think that, I don't think we're going to get information during Gamescom. I'm betting they do an Ubisoft forward in the next couple weeks, maybe after Gamescom, where they might reveal it. The problem is I really think that they would almost be better off doing their own event, like doing a Heartland announcement where they show gameplay, and you know, they have the Red Storm people on there to talk about their vision for the game and what they want to do, and hopefully release some type of a release date, even if it's for a beta. We'll have to see. But, you know, it was one thing to not hear about Heartland for a long time, but then you hear about X Defiant, and I think I said it back when X Defiant was announced. I just don't, I don't know who X Defiant is supposed to be for, especially in a world where Heartland is existing. And once we find out more about what that game is, it just seems weird. It seems like, for a while, and I know I've mentioned this before, I thought that all of this new attention, these books, the games, all of that under the Division franchise meant that the franchise was safe and strong. But now, as time goes on, and we don't get any information about what the Division 2 DLC content is going to be, we don't hear anything about Heartland. We see this bizarre X Defiant thing pop up that was clearly a Division game that they turned into, a party game with all the different franchises involved. Because let's be honest, there's only Division maps that they've talked about so far in X Defiant. So it was clearly a Division game. And then someone made a bad choice, in my opinion. And now I'm starting to fear that all of this attention on Division is actually a last gasp. And they're just trying to throw everything at the wall to see what sticks and to make as much money on the IP as they can before they shutter it for a few years. Because I don't think that they'll give Division 3 to a different studio. I think Massive will make Division 3 if a Division 3 happens. The problem is that the Avatar team will not finish Avatar and leave Avatar. That's supposed to be a many-year project where they're going to add to the game along with the 4 or 5 movies that are going to come out in the next 10 years. So that Avatar team, as far as I know, is on Avatar forever, as realistically. So then that leaves the people working on Star Wars, who I believe are a bunch of Division 2 devs. And, that game probably won't come out until 2024, maybe 2023, which means that Division 3, in theory, the earliest it could possibly start development would be 23 or 24. And you're talking about at least 2 years of development, but maybe 3 or 4. And then you're talking about, you're talking about 2027, 2028, and you're almost getting to a point where you're talking about end of this current console gen, or even the beginning of the next one. So the Division franchise in general is in such a weird spot right now, because from a on paper point of view, this should be the best time ever for Division. There's more content coming for the mainline game, Division 2. There's this whole spin-off game coming called Heartland. There's this semi-related game called X Defiant. They just had an audiobook. They have another book coming. There's a re-release of a comic coming out soon that was only released in non-North American territories. There's the movie coming out probably next year. And for someone like me who kind of is reading the tea leaves and stuff, I should be more excited than I've ever been, and I'm not. I'm actually terrified, and not terrified, it's just a game. I'm not that worried about it. But from a game fan, from a Division fan point of view, I'm not excited. I'm kind of scared, because it kind of feels like a last gasp instead of a full frontal charge. So I don't know. I hope I'm proven wrong soon. I would love to. I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong about where Division's IP is going. I hope I'm wrong about X Defiant. I hope I'm wrong about Ubisoft's intent for Division in general. It's one of those things where I'm saying things that I think make sense, and I hope I'm extremely wrong about every single one of them. The last bit here is talking about some upcoming games. So we have Psychonauts 2 coming out here in a few days. I am really excited about that. I never played the first one. I intend on watching some recap videos of the first game, because the first game just looks a little too dated for me to try to get into it. But the second one, from people who have played it early, it sounds very positive. It's not going to blow anyone away graphically, but story-wise and gameplay-wise, it sounds like it's extremely good. So I'm excited to check that out. Back 4 Blood, I played a beta or demo of that. I don't think there was an NDA, I'm pretty sure. So I really liked it. I really, really, really liked it. It feels good to play. I don't think it's a game that I'm going to play for 100 hours. It seems like a game I might jump on and play for 10 or 15. And I have Game Pass, so it's going to be free, so I can do that. And I'm not too worried about it. I really think it's 4 or 5 years late for this kind of a game. I feel like this should have come out a long time ago. But I will say that, there's been multiple games that have tried to copy the Left 4 Dead formula over the years, and they've all failed miserably. So having the Left 4 Dead people make a spiritual successor, it feels like it, and it feels good. I just don't, I'm curious if the market is really asking for that. And then the final one here is Forza Horizon 5 comes out here in a month or two. And I just can't wait to play that game just for the visual spectacle. It's just, I'm so excited to check that out because I like the other ones. I just never got into them from the start. So I felt like I missed out. And this time I'm excited to jump in right when it starts. Obviously there's Halo as well. You know, these are all games I'm excited about. But Halo's not coming, you know, until probably November or December at the earliest. So, and hopefully at Gamescom, they announce a release date for that. We have no listener questions this week or on this episode, so please make sure to throw those at me in future weeks if you want me to talk about something or if you have a question that you would like me to answer. For content updates, Bay Diesel is back to work, like I said, so it should open me back up to stream a bit more often and be a bit more consistent with the podcast. I am considering changing the day I release the podcast. I don't know. I'm going to do some maybe surveys or polls and kind of see what people think. I am curious. And my last thing is actually trying to leverage you guys a little bit. If you know someone who's selling or a way to get a 2070 or 2080 Super GPU or a 3060 Ti or a 3070, let me know. I'm ready, because if I can upgrade to one of those, my PC setup is good for like 3 or 4 more years, and I can stop thinking about it and I can just install everything and then not think about my PC for like 3 years. So let me know. I am curious. To wrap things up here, I am Bondiesel on Twitch, where I will start streaming here and there. You can check out my Twitter at Bondiesel, or if you just want gaming related stuff, check out at the EchoCast. If you want some cool EchoCast or Bondiesel merch, please check out streamlabs.com/Bondiesel. Please check out my Extra Life campaign. You can just search for Bondiesel or look on my Twitter profile. And we're at $500. I'd love to get to 1,000 by the end of the year, and I will start trying to push that a bit more on the stream. That's all I have. So until next time.